My earliest memory was running around the bar with my mom. My mom was a single mom. She was a barmaid in Houston, Texas, and she just took us along with her. One of my favorite memories was meeting who would become my stepdad at 4 years old on Halloween in the bar, dressed up in our outfits, running around, just acting like that was everyday life. But it was my everyday life, Then, like I said, I started drinking whenever I was 9 years old. It wasn't something that, was really looked down upon in my life. Everybody I knew and was around constantly was doing that, So it wasn't something that, you ever felt the shame of or that you really hit. Then I remember at 7, I had an older sister, and it was the first time that I didn't realize it then, but she was trying to kill herself. She had climbed on top of the couch, took a cord, wrapped it around her neck, and jumped down on the blind. And I was just like, what were you doing? I didn't realize really the depth of what was going on in her, and in our life at that time. When I was 9, my youngest brother was born, and my mom came home, and in not so colorful words, she was like, I popped him out, now he's yours to raise. So I was just, doing everything a mom would do at the age of 9. Then I started partying on the weekends. We moved up here whenever I was 13 to a really small town, which I really enjoyed. There was less than 600 people in the city we lived in. So every weekend there was parties, dirt track racing. I played sports and had a good life, I worked hard. Got my first job, like my first legal job when I was 15, and just gave my life to live in the same way that I was growing up. Back then, I started smoking pot whenever I was 16. When I was 20, my sister ended up actually committing suicide. She ended up shooting herself in the head and passing away. And then that was just a big downhill spiral for me. For a couple months, I went to Florida, met my new best friend, which was Coke. Spent a lot of time there just partying, not trying to think about what had happened back home. When I returned back home, everything kind of hit, and I got my nephew. I got custody of my nephew, but I wasn't probably in a state of mind to really take care of him for real. Then I found pills. I found everything to really numb my body from things that have been going on in my life. My mom was a really physically aggressive person, so that led to me being a physically aggressive person. I used to love getting in fights. I used to love getting hit. I used to, it was just my norm. You didn't love me if you didn't hit me, I just would go around, and I was just an angry, mean, mad person in the world. Didn't like God, didn't want to be a part of His world. The pills really made me depressed, and I just felt lazy, so then I met meth. Started getting high on meth and running around, and I started shooting up, and that was pretty much the end of everything. I lost everything. I lost my family relationships. I lost my life, I was just running around hopeless, a little zombie out there just going and not knowing and having no purpose in my life, no drive to even want to do anything better with my life. I started getting arrested at 26, continued that until 2017 when I got locked up the last time. That was shortly after I was in a car wreck. I went through the windshield of a car, landed in a field, woke up paralyzed from the neck down and couldn't move. They did 7 hours of neck surgery on me, and then called my parents to make sure that I was going to make it. Then they put me in a coma for 10 days. Then I did 40 hours of hip and pelvis surgery on me. And when they brought me back, I just remember crying out to God to let me know He was there with me and that everything was going to be okay. I looked over and picked up the phone, and I just dialed this random person. And when she answered, I asked her something, and she said, "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on in your life or who that is, but I want you to know God's there with you, and His angels are around you, and you're going to be okay." That was my first confirmation. That's who I needed to turn to. That's who is one that saves people. That's the one who helps people. My recovery was amazing. You wouldn't even know I was in a car wreck, really. Like, I have no problems in life because of that. It was truly because God healed me from that moment. He did put me in prison and jail to make me be still during that time so I could heal right and not be doing too much. So, but during that time, I really started going into the services when the ladies would come in jail, really listening to what they had to say. And I remember surrendering my life over to the Lord in jail. And then when I went to prison, I started really reading the Bible and trying to work on that relationship with God. Well, then He opened up the door for me to come to Mission Gate, and I was so blessed to be able to do so. But that's when I realized, I mean, I had a relationship with God, but where's Jesus at in my life? Jesus is the one that forgives and saves and heals and doesn't let us be condemned of the things of our past. He's the one who lets us move forward and know there's hope and peace and joy that can still come, and we can do something in our life. I was just able to really hone in on that relationship with Jesus Christ, that He was the one who I am to serve now. And the classes were amazing. I remember doing Making Peace with Our Past and hearing the verse, "No, there's no condemnation in those who are in Christ Jesus." And that every week we would go over that verse, and that just changed my life because it made me realize that I don't have to have those strongholds and that I don't have to be long-suffering. I don't deserve that because of Jesus Christ. He told me I didn't have to no more.
I said earlier, I started using drugs at the age of 14. I took from people, I would steal. I always wanted to do better, and I would come out of prison and I would have all these great hopes and all these dreams. And while I was in there, I would just I think I was going to do so good, and I would come out and I would just never be able to do what I thought I was going to be able to do. I would end up right back doing the exact same thing as I was doing before, and I could never figure out why, because I thought good intentions, and after years and years and years of doing these things, and 9 years in prison, and I joined the gang when I was young, and I've been doing a lot of bad things in my life, and the last time I got out, I knew that I wanted to be done getting high. I knew that I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to get high, but I just could not get out of that lifestyle. I just couldn't get out of that. I was scared to turn myself into rehab. I was scared to go back to jail. I just wanted to run. I didn't want to actually face my consequences. But I knew I wanted to be done. And I would even have thoughts like in my mind of like voices that would come to me that were people that I would even trust, screaming me to not go get high, don't do it, and all these things. And I read later on that I feel that it was, Paul talks about judging people's secret thoughts through his gospel declares by some thoughts, sometimes accusing them, either sometimes even defending him. And I feel like that was happening to me. He was judging my thoughts, but I still couldn't get out of it, even though these thoughts were coming. I didn't know who it was talking to me. And later on, I finally ended up getting locked up, and I ended up going to prison. And within the first couple of days there, I was already fighting and using drugs, doing the exact same thing I had already been doing my whole life. And we was actually, me and my cellie, he was a guy named Chance, and we was having a conversation. This sounds bad, but it's the truth. And we were talking about stealing cars. And when I got done talking about stealing cars, we actually started talking about Romans chapter 7. For what I want to do, I don't do. What I hate to do, and if I don't do what I want to do, what I hate to do, I agree that the law is good, and there's no one myself that does it with the sin living in me. And I still didn't understand what that meant. I didn't understand, But I sit on my bed that night, and when I'm sitting on my bed, my thoughts come to me and says, is it okay to steal if it's for food? If I'm hungry. And at that moment, I was like, why would my thought even make me think something like that when I was just talking about Jesus for this long? And at that moment, I had realized that it wasn't me doing it, but the sin was actually alive inside me. And when that happened, my head exploded, it changed. It went boom, and they say it's like an epiphany or whatever, but it changed my life. And I didn't know until years later that actually I feel like the Holy Spirit jumped inside me at that moment. And He washed me, and I was a dead person walking around. You've seen my picture. I walked around homeless on Goodfellow and Natural Bridge most of my life. That's where I stay. That's what I did, And I was not a good guy. And at that moment, I wasn't smart, and I'm still not smart. But He instilled things in me that I know He's alive and He has changed me. He washed me, and it's just amazing. And at that point, there was a PO named Amy Pratt, and I didn't know where I was going to go, but I just didn't know. I didn't want to go back to that same spot I was living. I got to Mission Gate, and it was completely different than what I expected. I expected like bunks or, because it's what I'm used to or whatever. When I got there, it was just amazing houses with animals that I'd never seen before and bugs that scared the crap out of me because I'd never been around those, and I was scared to walk in the nighttime and all this. But, it was just an amazing place. And being in prison, people will look down on you and lock you up for no reason and all this. And Rick and Trish and Toto and Joyce and all these people didn't look at my past. They didn't judge me for who I was. They didn't do anything, and they just helped me. And I see the Lord working there, and I see God in our lives, and I feel Him, and He is alive, and He is in Mission Gate, and I believe that.
Okay, so I'll just start from the beginning. So I had an active addiction for 9 years, in which I had been in and out of jail multiple times, which gave me the hard choice to have to place her with DFS with my maternal aunt at the time because I wasn't doing well. And it kind of spiraled downhill from there. It was one of the hardest times in my life. It just made my drug use so much harder. And the things I was doing, I felt like I lost her, I lost hope, I lost in everything, and I didn't know what to do. So I just went as hard as I could until I ended up in prison because it's the only way I thought I would get sober, to get away from that world and move on and actually have time to think. When I went to jail, that's where I gained my relationship with the Lord. I got in there and I said, hey, I've tried everything else on my own. I don't know what else to do on the streets. I gave up. So the next thing that I did is just pick up a Bible and I said, Lord, just speak to me. Help me not feel alone in this. What can I do, And so I read my Bible and I began to pray, and I didn't feel alone in that cell anymore. I don't know how to explain the feeling that overwhelmed me in my heart. And I felt like, this is a temporary time in my life, but I need to take the most of it to actually be sober. It's the only thing that's going to keep me away from that, So as I was there, I ended up going to get sentenced to jail. And this is the thing. I had conversations in my cell with the Lord and just building that relationship. And it came to my court date, and they're like, do you want to take 120 or they're going to try to send you your backup time? And it was the first time I heard the Lord. I'm facing a DFS case where I could lose my daughter. And in that moment, I heard him just, you need to take your time. And it was the hardest decision to stand there and tell the judge, no, I don't want 4 months. I want to sit long, And so that's what I did, just having faith that He would pull me through with her situation. So while I was incarcerated, I did go to the resource library about a year in to look for a place to go. And that's where I seen the Gate Ministries application. And so I applied. So when I got out, I went right to the ranch, and I just began having determination. And in my heart, I said, the Lord has pulled me through this. He's gave me a place to go, and I know I can be the mother that I'm destined to be. So I just kept driving myself to work harder and see that DFS treatment plan that they had. That was my goals. I'm here. I'm in a place where they gave me a job and they gave me hope. This is for me to work on me. So that's what I did. I took every step and checked off their list. And then they came to the ranch, and my attorney did, and still told me, no, you're still facing termination of parental rights. But I had this hope in Jesus to where I sat there and looked her in the face and was like, it's not if I get her back, it's when I get her back. I'm going to, I'm going to be the mother that I'm destined to be. And so I just held my faith throughout that whole time. And a few months later, I go to court and they change it from a termination of parental rights to reunification. So my goal was beginning to work, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain the whole courtroom when you see them sitting there and then their whole demeanor change about you. His whole presence was in that courtroom, the way they spoke and the way they talked. And so we carry on, and I end up getting visits with her more often. I graduate the ranch, I get my house, my car, and she starts staying overnight with me. It wasn't 4 months after I graduated the ranch, I got full custody back for her. My case was closed. Yes. And my case was open for 4.5 years. It was something that they hadn't seen. The judge was like, this is not normal, but to see the turnaround like that, it's just amazing. And I'm so thankful every day, and I give Him the glory because He made a change internally in me for growth throughout the program. It's just what I needed in my life at the time.
2006, I'm out of prison. on house arrest, living in my parents' house, and I get arrested for manufacturing at my parents' house. 10 days later, my daughter says I went to the house and Momo, my mom, was on the floor by her bed. The next day, I go to Mission Gate. I'm distraught because I knew something happened to my mom because of me. I go to Mission Gate, just whatever it is, and there's 12 of us in there and volunteers. And Rick happened to be there in the St. Louis County Jail. And Rick happened to be there, and I learned that he hadn't been there probably in 10 years. And he gave a little bit of his testimony. And he wasn't a good person. He told a story of going out of a bar to use a phone in the cold and coming to, looking up at this black officer looking down at him saying, "Is that how you want to look when you meet Jesus?" And he didn't think nothing of it. A couple of years goes by, his life is spiraling out of control, and he's sitting in the front seat of his car with a 38, ready to end this thing. And he remembers that guy. He calls out to God in that moment. I am weeping because my mom's in the hospital, and I know it was my fault. I've been in church my whole life, and here I am, a 40-year-old man, and my mom's in the hospital, and I just knew it was my fault. And I wept because if God could save him, there was hope for me. And I invited Jesus into my heart that night, which happened to be September 9th, Saturday, September 9th, 2006, my mother's birthday. And I'm gonna leave on that note. Thank you.
I was sitting at this table looking at this, and I was just thinking, why me? Why me? I am a very blessed man. You've heard from all the stories tonight of a lot of individuals who were raised in homes that weren't Christians. And for me, I can understand because I was raised in a home that wasn't a Christian home. And I don't want you guys to think that I'm trying to tell my story to make it worse than someone else's. But I do know that there's Christians in here that have a normal life and they don't realize that the children are being brought up in drug houses. That there's children that are being literally raised by Satan and his demons and they don't even know it. And that's what's so important to me about Mission Gate. Now, not only because they accepted me once, but they accepted me twice. I hate to put it this way, but I was raised by Satan, basically. I was born and raised in East St. Louis, Washington Park. I have a brother that was murdered. My mom has a brother that was murdered. My uncle went to prison for murdering his wife. We have cousins. My cousin Noel is here to support me, which I'm very thankful. He's one of the few people in my family that gave their life to the Lord, so it means so much he's here. We're raised by Satan. Drugs, alcohol, murder. That was just our lifestyle. Me and Noel talked many times about our life and our childhood. And at some point in our childhood, or at some point in some of our family members' childhood, someone walked away from God. And the Bible talks about generational curses. And that's a thing, it's real. There's I'm not exaggerating, there's some people in our family that have died from drugs, or that went to prison, or that are still on drugs. It's embarrassing to say, but unless God steps in through ministries like Mission Gate, some people will die in their sins. The Bible says, if the message is not preached, how can someone hear it? And I'm not going to talk about a whole lot about my childhood, but I will tell you that I was certified as an adult when I was 16 years old, based on a lot of time in prison. In my family, you really wasn't considered a man until you hurt someone or you went to jail. And I'm like the run of the family, so I chose jail, I guess. I could hurt anybody. But so I was in jail at a very young age, and a preacher came and preached the gospel Halloween night, 1999. His name was Jack Henry. I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And we have these hopes and these dreams. We have God, and we have God in our vessel. We get out, we have nowhere to go. And I got out of jail, and I was going down real quick. I heard about this ministry called Mission Gate Prison Ministries, for Good Shepherd. I think I was 17 at the time. It was a new program. I was the youngest one ever there. They took me in. I gave my life to Jesus, and it was a great time in my life. I spent 14 months there the first time. It was really weird because I'm so used to a chaotic lifestyle that, like, I would see people at Mission Gate like sit down and eat, or Rick Rick don't get enough credit. I don't think he does anymore, but he used to cook like this meal every week, and it was like a Thanksgiving meal to me. I'm like, this is wow. He cooked this huge meal, and everybody's just like eating it like it's over there. Like, I've never seen a meal like this in my life. Not only did they put Jesus in me, but they put the lifestyle of a family in me, and I mean that. Rick has been great to me. He's been stern to me when he's had to be, and I appreciate that. I love you too. I look up to this man. I left Michigan the first time. I got to a small church. I met someone I fell in love. We started a family. Life was doing great, but what did I do? I kind of started hanging out with people that started hanging out with my family again. And I started using prescription pills. And I knew I shouldn't. The Bible's very clear. It says we are lured away by our own human desires. And I chose that. And I didn't do all of it, but I went from being part of a small town Baptist church, helping with Little League, to being on the news for some things. And the son's here. But there's many years that I just walked away from Christ. So when I read that, why me, Lord, I mean that. Why me? For years, I had it so good. And I was a guy who came from nothing and had everything. I threw it all away. I gave it away. It's so weird that now that I submit my life to Jesus, I look at it now that I submitted my life to drugs and alcohol, and I didn't really see it then. So it's very important for me to come back 7.5 years later to tell you guys about Mission Gate, what they do. Mission Gate is great. It's a great program. The day after Christmas 2015, after 6 or 7 tumultuous years of being in and out of jail, rehabs, and several things on the mission, I overdosed and someone threw me out of the car. But I came to mentally New Year's Eve 2015. My overdose day after Christmas 2015. I came to mentally. I was in the psych ward. I just didn't know what to do. And it's really corny how this went down, but I was in Belleville, Illinois, and third floor of the psych ward. There was this huge cross that was like in my window. And I knew that every time I ran to Jesus, it was okay. I knew it was okay, so the sun was coming in, I could see that cross, and I just slid out of that bed and just gave my life to Jesus that day, rededicated my life, repented of my wandering away, and I have not looked back. Yeah. So I called Trish from the psych ward, kind of nervous about it, and she told me that if I wanted to come back, I needed to go to the program. So I just dove into God's Word, God's Spirit. 7.5 years later, after I went through Michigan again, God has been great to me. He's faithful when I wasn't. My life is so good now. My children, my wife, and my best friends. God is great. God has been good to me. I can talk on for hours. How He has blessed me and what miracles He's done in my life. He really has done miracles. And it's my belief that when Rick and Trish had their mindset on Mission Gate, that Jesus had His mindset on me and my children. Because if it wasn't for Mission Gate, I wouldn't have nowhere to go. I know where I was going. So he literally had my children on His mind.
Hey, I'm going to skip to the part where I went on tour through 6 municipalities for like 20 plus years. Going through. And now, I always failed to appear because I was busy using the money doing other things. Wasn't in any kind of trouble, but except for the problem with addiction when I began to turn my life around. Got up. I kept hearing voices. I had a friend that said, "Man, you need to turn yourself in. Just tell them you got a problem. You need to shut up and playing chess." Then my mom used to say, "Dana, don't let me leave here. And you still acting up." So I got myself straight before she left. I woke up one Sunday morning. I went to Schnucks. I said a prayer first. And I said, "Lord, it seems like every time they let me out of the jail, I stop you at the door and say, I got it from here." And And I go back out and I continue to do the same thing. It's almost like you call the very people to get you set up to have you on your way back. So I said, since I keep leaving you there, and I got the traffic points, I'm going to go back there. And I'm getting the sale as fast as I can. And I'm going to read your book from cover to cover, see what was wrong with me and what I was predestined to be doing. So, got in there and I did that. I went through St. Louis County for like 4 months. One of the pastors said, man, you ought to go to Michigan. I'm like, what's that? You know, and he's telling me about it. I said, it sounds okay. You know, and my okay was, I'm going to make sure I don't get caught by nobody else. You know, you say you're sorry, but it's like, I'm sorry you caught me. That's really what you're saying. And I made sure I'd be a little more slicker next time, you know. So I thought I was telling God how I wanted to do it. I told him I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And when they called me to court, I'm going to actually go this time and finish. But when I went to court, the judge said, it don't seem like bonds phase you, so we're going to hold you. The thing that saved me every time I got bad news was I told him that I didn't do enough to stay in jail forever. And I said, no matter what happens, I'm going to trust you. But it can't be as long as it took me going through it. I left there and I went to, ended up in Madison County. And the judge told me, well, we're offering you 6 years. Just on the history, you know. And he said, anything you want to say? I said, yeah, I'd like to go to Michigan. And he said, well, what is that? I said, I'm not that sure. Because, I mean, you know, they told me when I was leaving out of the county, and he said, well, we're going to take a recess. Now, I'm thinking, I'm going to go to St. Louis. I can do a little 3 months, and I'd be on the street, you know, and I can go back and forth, and I get it together. And they was like, you got to go to Cuba, Missouri. And, Chris, I tell you, when you talk about those bugs, he is not kidding. Anyway, I did that. In fact, I was supposed to stay there a year. When I got there first, you know, that was my roommate over there, man. And I thank God for the brother, man. We did a lot of studying, sitting up, a whole lot. And I'm supposed to left after a year. I think I stayed there about another 4 months or something. You know, I wanted to catch everybody coming to the door and say, man, you can make it. You can do this. You know, because I felt discouraged. And I felt like if anybody come in and feel like that, you know, it's our own fault. So we can't be discouraged about being somewhere that we don't want to be. And every place we were going was some place we didn't need to be, you know? So, got out of there, left Michigan. Then I went to stay in it was an abandoned convent. Guy owned a Catholic church, but the convent we were going to renovate it and do something. Stayed in there for about a year and a half or something. Then I met a friend that she wanted to come and talk to me about God, and she got to talking. We were sitting talking, studying. She was like, how do you know so much? I said, well, I really about him too. You know, and I know who he is too. Anyway, she's been my wife now for 10 years. Thank God so much for the peace that I had. Because, I mean, almost being anywhere else, you got distractions. I can say at Mission Gate, you wasn't going to have any distractions, you know, unless you wasn't used to the country like myself. My only distraction was mosquitoes, hearing the donkeys, and all of that. But I love the experience, and I haven't looked back since.